Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're still aspiring to be viral. We're still aspiring to be caffeinated. And we are now a proudly sponsored weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a fan base that can kind of point and laugh at some of the other preseason top 10 teams. I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend, and hoping this show is both cathartic and serendipitous. He's Tyler James in LaPorte and serving as my gibberish English translator tonight. Together, we are the word salad avoiding content creators at blueandgold.com. On tonight's show, we'll take a look at some of the momentum Notre Dame is building with 3 straight lopsided wins and a defensive surge that might just be for real. There's some really interesting personnel moves and updates. We'll also have recruiting and your questions, so start filling up that question portal. This is
Football Never Sleeps.
All right. As Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is now presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana and a new store open now in Mishawaka, fun can't lose and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors. I hope everyone enjoyed the first weekend with Notre Dame owning a winning record this season. We appreciate everyone joining us live and interacting with us tonight. Shout out to Mike DeVoy, Clontarf, Irish fan, Scott Fegan, Jeff Stevens. We appreciate you all chiming in the comments already. And thank you to those who are watching us on replay as well. Please make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and chime in with your thoughts in the comments throughout the show as well. And before we get into today's topics, I wanted to remind you of our subscription deal for new subscribers to blueandgold.com. We're offering $1 per week for an entire year, so you can purchase an annual subscription to Blue and Gold for just $52, which is more than half off the regular price. Head to blueandgold.com, hit the Join Now button at the top of the page, and take advantage of this awesome deal. We've also included a link to the subscription page in the video description as well. You don't need a promo code. Just go sign up for $1 a week. And I think we'll have plenty of content that will make you believe that that is worth it. All right. Well, let's get started with our opening drive and talk about Marcus Freeman meeting with us reporters today. He reviewed the win over Boise State and started to look ahead at NC State. Eric, what were your biggest takeaways from Freeman's press conference?
For me, some of the personnel updates today were what jumped out at me. The situation with the kickers, and we'll get into more depth with these Cooper Flanagan news, and the fact that Dallas Golden's going to be making a second college start with Devontae Smith on the show. I think those are all important, not only in the context of this week, but maybe the context of some other games coming up in the season, including USC. Getting those situations squared away this week, I think, is really big. And I also got some takeaways from his talk about the defense, particularly the linebackers, which is what I wrote about tonight. Just a little bit more insight into why things are starting to work. I thought that was very interesting. How about you, Tyler? What got your attention?
Yeah, I thought his comments about momentum were interesting. He believed in momentum, but sort of only in retrospect. You can't really worry about momentum when preparing for the upcoming opponent, and he's aware that Notre Dame has started to put some things together in a positive direction, but that isn't necessarily going to help them when it comes to preparing for the next opponent. Penalties were a big discussion. He said we got to clean up some of the penalties. That's something that sticks out. Way too many penalties for the team we aspire to be. Are you concerned with Notre Dame becoming a penalty-laden team?
Not really, because they had shown it. I mean, they almost had half their season total on Saturday. And I think sometimes when you get in a game with a team that typically gets a lot of penalties, sometimes you get dragged into that. In Boise, there are only 3 teams in the country that are more penalized than them in the FBS. So they're way down there and being one of the most penalized teams. And I think, Notre Dame coaches not to have those. And they were able to overcome some of those on defense, which I thought was interesting and impressive. But I am not concerned. How about you? Are you concerned that this is a trend?
Not necessarily. I don't think that I saw a ton of stuff that was like, okay, these are recurring issues that are just becoming more magnified. And Marcus Freeman discussed it in a way that he said he's okay with some of the aggressive penalties, but when you have a lack of discipline or a lack of focus, and that leads to penalties, then those are problems. From my perspective, and I think he probably would say the same. I don't know that he said this explicitly, but the Kingston Viliamu-Asa and Jason Onye roughing the passers are plays that you just sort of live with. Like those are guys getting after the quarterback, and while they can be crushing it because roughing the passer penalties are harsh, those guys are trying to get their job done and maybe are just a little bit off in technique that are leading to some of the issues that occurred. But the false starts, some of the late hits, those are things that are more preventable. And Notre Dame needs to get those things cleaned up. But I don't think we're going to start to see Notre Dame become a team that has a lot of penalties. I see it as more of a one-off, and we'll see if that happens to be the case.
In terms of solid numbers here, let me share for those that weren't keeping score of the penalties at home. 11 accepted penalties for 112 yards for Notre Dame, 13 for 112 yards for Boise State. Boise State averages about 9 penalties a game, so that was high even for them. If you wonder, wow, I wonder what the Marcus Freeman era high is for penalty yards, that was it. And the school record is 175, set way back in 1954 against SMU. The most penalties in a game by a Notre Dame team is 16, and that was in 1952 against Iowa.
All right, another topic of conversation today was the 4th and goal failure in the game. That was another Wildcat play gone wrong, I was trying to get him to spin it forward in terms of what are their issues in terms of short yardage situations and how are they trying to address it. But he was laser focused on what went wrong on that 4th and goal play, because I did mention it, so I understand why he talked about it. He said that Boise State didn't really do what they thought they were going to do given that look. And so that sort of led to Notre Dame maybe running in a spot that wasn't advantageous to Notre Dame's offense compared to what Boise State's defense was doing. He said, as we prepared that, we thought it was going to hit right there in that C to D gap. There were a lot of people in that C and D gap that we didn't expect to be there. Eric, regardless of the specifics on that play, are the Irish approaching short yardage situations the right way, in your opinion? What are your thoughts on how they have looked in short yardage situations?
Well, I can give you some solid numbers here. Notre Dame, both in offensive and defensive 4th downs, was in the top 10 last year. They were 8th in 4th down conversions. They were converting at about a 73% clip. They were 22 of 30. They are in the bottom 4th of teams this year, 4 for 11 for 38 or 36.4%. Now, the natural thing is Riley Leonard. Yeah, he was a 4th and 1, 3rd and 1 kind of machine. They don't seem to have found something that's really solid for them yet. They've tried different things. They've tried the Wildcat. Again, we can talk about this a little bit later in the show, but I do think Cooper Flanagan being back gives you a little bit more formational oomph with a tight end. I mean, from Pro Football Focus's grades last year before he suffered the Achilles injury against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl in the CFP quarterfinal, he was Notre Dame's highest rated both pass blocker and run blocker among tight ends. So I think his return will give them some more options, but I think they have to be more creative, just not having somebody like Riley Leonard to do the dirty work. How about you? What do you think about the 4th down stuff?
Yeah, Mike DeVoy chimed in. Please tell us Marcus ripped the Wildcat page out of the playbook, or at least we'll have J Love pass the ball. Well, you got half of that because he said he called it a growing package, And if we have to throw to Carr, he said, as a wideout, that maybe that's something we have to do. So he's not ruling that out. I don't know that when I had in terms of finding solutions, I'm not sure that would be on my short list. What I didn't and haven't liked, and it was sort of reflective of that answer that he gave in terms of we thought this would work based on what we thought Boise State would do. And to me, short yardage, it should be about yourself. It shouldn't be about the defense. It should be you sort of imposing what you want to do on the defense, not like reacting to what they're doing. That's not for every case, right? Like obviously there's things you can do in the passing game and different things you can do that maybe outsmart them or trick them or play fakes that work. But I think that reflects poorly on your ability to sort of physically dominate in ways to create the advantages there, where I think you would like to think that Notre Dame should be able to push around Boise State in a situation like 4th and goal at the 1. So I don't love that Notre Dame is trying to be predictive there. I would just run your best. It's almost like the 2-point conversions, right? Usually people talk about, well, you usually have a set of plays that are 2-point conversion plays that you feel confident that these are going to score in these scenarios. Like Notre Dame needs to have those kinds of plays for its 3rd and short and 4th and short. I'm writing about this for tomorrow, and so I have some numbers based on this year in terms of the short distance. On 3rd and 4th and 3 or shorter this season, Notre Dame is 10 of 18. They're 8 of 15 on running plays and 2 of 3 on passing plays. So 10 of 18 is 55.5%. I don't have any context in terms of how that stacks up against the rest of the country yet, and we'll see if I can find that before the night ends. But
it's lower than what they were 4th in any distance last year,
right? And I would imagine a lot of those distances last year were fairly short because that was what they were best at doing in those situations with Riley Leonard, and they don't have an answer yet, in my opinion, in terms of what Riley Leonard was doing, and I think Notre Dame needs to sort of figure that out and have a better plan. And maybe it is passing the ball. Maybe they can rely on CJ Carr to throw the ball more consistently and get those guys open. Jordan Faison seems like someone who's really hard to cover in short spaces, and so maybe they turn to that more moving forward. All right, let's get to some availability updates before we hop into the question portal. Nickelback Devontae Smith has already been declared out for the game with a right calf injury. Notre Dame might be fine without him Saturday against NC State, in my opinion. But how important is it for him to get back for the USC game, Eric?
I think it's incredibly important for him to get back to USC because they have receivers all over the field that can hurt you, and they can bring them in waves. And that's kind of what they did last year. And to not have him in that game, I mean, Dallas Golden is improving,
right?
But I think Devontae Smith, we've seen when he's been healthy, he's really good. And to be able to tag team him with Dallas Golden, I think is a good thing. But for Dallas to have to play 65 snaps or more against USC, I think that's a tough ask for any freshman. And so, yeah, get him, let him sit out this week and then try to get him back for USC.
Yeah, and USC's top receiver, Mekhi Lemon, has played out of the slot on 66% of his pass snaps. So that is where USC is going to want to try to throw the ball. And so Notre Dame needs to make sure it has as much attention on him as possible. Lemon has 35 catches for 589 yards and 5 touchdowns so far this season. Golden is someone I like. I think we both like. He's an ascending player, but I just don't know that you want him on Lemon for a full game or maybe any slot receiver for a full game if you don't have to at this point to be able to have a rotation. And I'm not sure where the confidence level of, like, if Devontae Smith is gone, now that Carson Hobbs is the backup nickelback, is there confidence in putting Carson Hobbs back out there at nickelback? That would be a reversal of the way things have trended as of late in terms of his playing time and what Notre Dame's been asking of him. There were also 4 players who were listed as questionable. Kicker Noah Burnett with a right hip injury, wide receiver Jaden Greathouse with a right thigh injury, defensive end Preston Zinter with a concussion, and tight end Cooper Flanagan with his left Achilles injury. First, let's talk about Burnett. Eric, how concerning is Burnett's ongoing on and off injury situation?
After hearing Marcus Freeman talk about it today, I think it's real concerning because it doesn't feel like they have a handle on why it's happening.
Right.
He had talked about overuse at North Carolina leading to some injuries, and yet you can't just not kick for a couple of weeks and expect to go out and make a big one in a big game. And so I really feel like plan B has to go onto the front burner. And then if you get Burnett back at some point and he's reliable, then that's a bonus. But I think you have to decide between Eric Schmidt and Marcello Diamede. Who do you trust more? They both have good qualities. I think Marcello is probably a little bit more accurate at this point. Eric Schmidt has a cannon for a leg and could probably make you a 55 or 56 yarder, but is it going to be through the uprights? So, I mean, he's a touchback machine on those kickoffs. He's had one kickoff that wasn't a touchback and he kicked it out of bounds. The rest of them have all been touchbacks. So, I mean, there's some power in that leg, but you need to get him used to the pressure. And I think even if Burnett was good enough to kick this week, I think you kick one of the other two in this game and have them firmly established so that when you are in a tight game, they've had that experience. I think that's the way I would go with it. I think that's what Marcus is going to do.
Yeah, that was one thing that I was interested in, is if, like, is it more important for Burnett to prove that he's healthy against NC State to be ready for the USC game, or is it more important for Schmidt or Diamede to see one go through the uprights? And I think you can make a case in either direction. And at least, like, Burnett has kicked plenty before. Like, he's not an inexperienced kicker, but you just feel like you have to have one of those backups ready to go, because it doesn't seem like Notre Dame is being able to have a sense or being able to predict when Burnett is or isn't going to be able to go out there for you. And I think it probably doesn't necessarily help the preparation for Schmidt and Diamede at all either. All right, next one, Jaden Greathouse. Do you think he is in danger of losing playing time to Will Pauling the longer that he remains sidelined?
I don't think so. I think they know what Jaden Greathouse can do. I think what could happen if he's gone for an extended period of time is that maybe they use Will Pauling on the outside, but then are you really going to sit Jordan Faison?
Right.
But I do think when you look at the types of receivers they are, their physical stature, I think Will Pauling is a little bit under 6 foot and around 200 pounds. And Greathouse is a solid 6'1", 215, and just big physical kid that uses his body well. So I still think there's a role for him, even if he's out for a couple weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is. Notre Dame knows that he can give them something, especially in the red zone against smaller nickels. I like Jaden Greathouse having a role, but Pauling's coming on.
Yeah, he's making a strong case, which isn't surprising. I was very high on him in the preseason, and I think part of that was because I thought maybe he would play more to the field in addition and split some time with Jordan Faison, and I definitely underestimated the impact that Jordan Faison would have as potentially Notre Dame's best receiver right now this season. But I think there should be plenty of playing time for Greathouse when he returns. They can do things differently, and I think they can find a way to work those guys in. It'll be interesting too when Notre Dame gets Cooper Flanagan back, who we'll talk about shortly. Like, how much does Notre Dame lean even more into 12 personnel as it started to do so in recent weeks, and maybe not as much last week, but does Notre Dame like 12 personnel with Cooper Flanagan better than some, especially when it wants to establish the run, than maybe some 11 personnel with a slot receiver out there. And we've alluded to Flanagan enough times now. How big of a boost do you think it would be if Cooper Flanagan could get back in the mix for Notre Dame?
I think it's understated by a lot of people. You know, you look at the depth chart and you say, well, gosh, he's not even the starting tight end, but 6'6", 255, a really good pass blocker, a really good run blocker. I just think it gives you more variety on offense. Mike Denbrock likes to have a lot of different gears and different formations and personnel groups in his holster. And this gives you a really solid 2 tight end set where you might feel comfortable with 3 tight ends at some point.
Right.
And I think we're going to see that in the second half of the season as Cooper Flanagan comes back when the occasion calls for it. There's teams that you can push around like that. Not everybody, but there are teams where that's going to be advantageous. And I think this is really significant and surprising. I mean, you think about Achilles injuries, and for somebody to come back, 9 months after suffering one is really incredible timeline.
Yeah, I remember with Jadarian Price being sort of surprised at how good he looked coming back from his Achilles injury, and I don't know that's someone that there might be people that don't remember that because of how good he has looked as a running back since then. So I'm curious what Flanagan looks like. I'm sure he's not going to look exactly like his old self immediately, but when he can get back there, I think he is a definite positive for Notre Dame's running game as a tight end, and I think he's probably even more of a passing threat than Ty Washington is, and I really like the idea of 3 tight end sets. I think Notre Dame's been doing some goofy things in terms of its personnel and goal line situations because it doesn't feel confident in its depth at tight end and ability to use those guys, and so I think getting Flanagan back could be a potential big aid there. All right, let's hop into some questions. John K says, any official update about Charles Jagusa's status? Out for a year, return date, ?
I had a story last week about that. And he had a setback with his recovery. And so this elongated his timeline. Now, Notre Dame did not confirm this, and nor are they ruling him out for the year. What I see it as, he's probably not going to play this year. If he does, it would be in a playoff situation. And it wasn't him doing something irresponsible. It was that there was a plate put in his it's his humerus. It's its upper left arm. The plate broke. They had to go back in there and clean some things up. So it was a cleanup procedure. But that just kind of elongates things. And at this point, it's probably best that he just sit out the season, reboot, and come back next year. So that's his status.
All right. Next question is from Mike DeVoy. I'm thinking maybe you should have awarded a game ball to the left side of the offensive line. What do you think?
Well, I wasn't in charge. I'll let Tyler talk about his game balls.
Yeah, I chose to give one offensive game ball. Then that was to CJ Carr. I think he could have given it to either of the running backs too. Probably more worthy was Jeremiah Love than Jadarian Price. I didn't necessarily consider that with the left side of the offensive line. I think Billy Schrouth had some penalties. Maybe Knapp had a penalty too. So I don't know that I would necessarily highlight them above others, but I think the offensive line play in general has been improved, and Notre Dame is making strides there and finding ways to be able to use that offensive line to sort of dictate what it wants to do offensively. Jeff Stevens says, regarding linebackers, it doesn't look like Madden Framo is redshirting. What is his strength, and is he best on passing downs?
I think he is right now. I think he can do everything, and I think he's going to end up being a really important piece in Notre Dame's linebacker core for years to come. He played 5 snaps on Saturday, which wasn't very much, all in coverage, and he got a really good Pro Football Focus grade from those 5 snaps. I think he played 13 the game before and 23 in his debut game, which would have been against Purdue. And so I like where his game is going. For me, the most significant thing is Snead and Drake Bowen getting their act together. They've both been pretty quiet the first 4 games. Snead had the second highest PFF grade of his career in the game on Saturday, and it would have been even higher had he gotten credit for that interception that was wiped out by a penalty. He only played 24 snaps, but they were really good snaps. He was really good in coverage, which hasn't necessarily been his strength. And Drake Bowen had his best score of the season, not to the level that he was playing at the end of last season, but a big improvement. And I think if those 2 guys are finally getting through the scheme shock, that's going to be a really good sign for Notre Dame. And as I mentioned in my story that I posted before we went on the air with Football Never Sleeps, there's a lot of talent at that position. Notre Dame, in the last 20 completed recruiting cycles, has recruited 6 players who were recruited as linebackers who were in the top 60 national players. 4 of them are on the roster all at the same time right now. The other 2 are Manti Te'o and Jalen Smith, but the 4 on the roster, it's everybody in that 5-man rotation except Jaden Osbury, who was a Rivals 250 guy. So it wasn't like he was, this 2-star that came out of nowhere. It's a really good player. So they have a lot of talent, and being able to maximize that talent, including Faremo, I think can take this defense to the next level.
Yeah, I think Faremo is a very well-balanced linebacker. I think he can do both cover and help in run defense. And I think the question probably wasn't in terms of his ability. It was more just in terms of him being able to understand what was needed to do out there, fit in with the other guys, and sort of acclimate to the team. I remember I made some comment during the playoff when we saw him, like, we're just doing warm up or going through practice with the team, because some of the freshmen joined the team early. And I made some comment about, like, man, he looks like someone who's physically ready to play. And then, like, someone got very upset at the fact that I would consider that a possibility. And it's like, well, I don't know that he looks that much different now than he did then, and he's playing now. So I think he is someone that is good in coverage. I don't know that he's going to be someone that you just put in there for coverage situations necessarily. I think I know people are of separate sides on terms of how much Drake Bowen should play in passing situations, but I think Drake Bowen is giving so much in terms of pass rush that it's hard to take him off the field, and you can't just, like, keep a guy out there and he's going to pass rush or know he's going to be in coverage, so they have to mix it up with those plays. And obviously if it's a first down, the offense is allowed to throw the ball too. But I think there's going to be opportunities to get Madden Framo on the field, but I don't know that it'll be, like, specifically like passing situations.
And Notre Dame played a lot more 3 linebackers in this game than they have in the other games.
Mike DeVoy says, where, pray tell, can the Lightning Green Beans recipe be found?
And I think I saw Scott mention this, that he asked me in the chat if he should have lightning delay green beans or fettuccine Alfredo, and I said both, and he said that was a hit. Mike, I had it on my to-do list. I had 2 things that I want to get done besides really do a good job covering the game. One was get a linebacker lounge hat. That was accomplished. The other thing was asking the kitchen staff that cater to the rich people there that are in the media for the recipe. I was not successful at tracking them down, but that is on my list for Saturday, is talking to someone and seeing if I can get the recipe. And if I do, I will share it, I promise, on this show. And maybe even make them and eat them while Tyler's talking.
I would gladly talk for 20 minutes straight if we got footage of you making lightning green beans. However long, I'll bite the bullet. People might get sick of me, but that would be content you couldn't get anywhere else. That's for sure.
And it's not like I'm this green bean fanatic. I'm like, on a scale of 1 to 10 on what would excite me being on the table, they're about a 5. But those green beans are a 12 out of 10.
All right, Jeff Stevens. I guess Flanagan, the freshman, isn't ready on the short yardage plays.
He's not. And when I talked to Mike Denbrock about him, I think they're really, really encouraged about maybe second half of the year, him getting more involved. They really like what his future looks like, but there was a lot of learning to do with him. Really good athlete. And again, he wasn't here in the spring. For some people, that makes a difference. For some, it doesn't. But he was out winning a couple of Wisconsin State track and field championships in the shot put in the discus. So he wasn't here early. But the tight end room is one of the position groups that could look a lot different in the second half of the season than it does the first half. It may be a Flanagan fest in the second half with Cooper Flanagan and James Flanagan, no relation.
Yeah, I thought James Flanagan would be someone who could make an impact as a freshman, and that hasn't necessarily been the case. And so I'm curious to see if he can get in the mix and find ways to get some more playing time. Maybe there's a 3 tight end set with 2 of the Flanagans and Eli Raridan in the future, but that hasn't been the case necessarily yet. So we'll see when and how he can get on the field more. And Jeff also said, I just am scared of the term lightning associated with any food. And to be clear, there's nothing lightning about the green beans themselves. We were just served them during the lightning delay, and that is why we call them lightning green beans. If Eric went up to the food staff and said, "Hey, can I get the recipe for lightning green beans?" They'll be like, "What are you talking about?" They wouldn't know what we were referencing.
And I'm not trading the linebacker hat to get him, but I will beg and look pathetic. So,
all right. Scott Fegan says, "What is the position group you feel still needs to step up for the NC State game besides kicking?"
Well, I think the linebackers will. I think for the rest of the season, because you look at Notre Dame's matchups, and they every offense except for Stanford's is in the upper half, and most of them are in the upper quarter of total offenses in the country, and they're just relentless in coming at them. And I think the linebackers, I think that's where there's a lot of room for growth. I think all the defensive position groups need to. I mean, they still need to keep coming with pass rush. Leonard Moore has stabilized the back end, but they need to be really good for USC because USC is balanced and powerful. I mean, I can't think of any position group that doesn't need to improve, but I think the linebackers need to show up and show out against NC State, just how imbalanced NC State is as a very good offense and a really struggling defense.
Yeah, and part of what NC State does well offensively is uses tight end Justin Jolly, and so tight ends and or safeties will need to make sure they have good coverage of him, and also the running back Hollywood Smothers, and I have to take any chance to say Hollywood Smothers as I can.
Right.
Is a very elusive back. I think I have some stuff I looked up for later when we were talking about NC State. Let's see, he is ranked. PFF has an elusive rating, and it's his rating is 171.6, which of course means nothing to any of us, but that is 6th among running backs with 50 attempts across the country. And he's tied for 4th in missed tackles forced with 32. So he's someone that is doing a lot of work with not great blocking from the NC State offensive line. So Notre Dame's linebackers will need to make sure that they're sound in tackling against NC State.
And CJ Bailey's a problem too. I mean, he's kind of Talon Green light. He's 6'6" and 213. He doesn't get as involved in planned runs. He's more of a scrambler or a play extender, but he's exciting. I've watched a lot of NC State football. For some reason, they're on Fridays and Thursdays, and when I'm not working, and I've seen them, I think, as much them and BYU for some reason I've seen a lot of this year.
Irish fan says, Tyler, I heard them play guerrilla radio in between plays. So do you have some sway with that stuff? I do not have any sway, although I have done stories on the sort of in-game presentation I've interviewed, I'm not sure, video producer, I'm not sure their exact titles, but I've interviewed people that have says in that before. And it is funny to hear a Rage Against the Machine song in Notre Dame Stadium, but I'm a big fan of Guerrilla Radio and some of their songs, so I think it worked. And I'm just curious how quickly the band can learn one of the new Taylor Swift songs to start performing that. I'm sure Eric will be jazzed about that.
Well, you'll have to tell me which ones they are, since I don't know what they are. Only one I know is Cardigan.
That would not be a good football song.
Well, neither was Heaven Is a Place on Earth, and they did that by Belinda the Carlisle. Play some Ramones.
Yeah, you would think Ramones could fit into a football stadium, but I don't know that I remember hearing any.
Hey Ho, Let's Go. That's the Ramones.
Yeah,
you've heard that.
Yeah, no, I know Ramones songs, but yeah, I'm just not sure that I've heard that they play many in Notre Dame Stadium.
Well, they need to play I Want to Be Sedated. That would be good.
They could have done that during like a review with the referees on Saturday.
We played it at my wedding.
T. Dawson says, any word on Greathouse returning for NC State? Sorry if you already covered earlier.
Yeah, the word is he is questionable, and I think they'll be cautious with him, and we'll get an update on Thursday. And so I always do a notebook, and Kyle Kelly does a kind of an immediate transcript on Thursday. So check out our website on Thursday.
Yeah, and Tyler Horka and Jack Sobel have done a good job in terms of reporting on his injury, and they had expressed that their sources had indicated it wouldn't necessarily be a long-term injury. So we'll see how quickly he can get back, but no necessarily clarity on his status going into Saturday yet. MJH Irish 84 says, guys, it's been a long time since I've seen I think probably Notre Dame. I think that's probably an autocorrect. Notre Dame quarterback utilize the pump fake on scrambles. To me, that shows CJ is much advanced beyond his current grade. How high is his ceiling? His calling. Sorry, I really butchered that.
I talked to a great source last week for an intel piece I did, and they feel like in 2026 that CJ Carr's these kind of things will show up more. His running ability, his scrambling ability, the ability to just be a half step quicker, turn a 3-yard scramble to maybe an 8-yard scramble. And the pump fake, I think, is part of that. And it looked really, really good. It's something he wants to get better at. And Mike Denbrock would like CJ to get better at. But I think when you'll see more dramatic improvement will be in 2026.
Yeah, his ceiling is incredibly high. I think that's why both Eric and I were always in the camp that he would eventually be Notre Dame's starting quarterback, and it wasn't necessarily just about this season, but what he could become long term. And I think the ceiling is very high. There's been folks in the national media who have started already singing his praises. So I think the ceiling is about as high as you can get in terms of being a Notre Dame quarterback. I don't know that he necessarily is going to be the greatest dual threat quarterback in the world, but I think he's a guy that's going to be able to make a lot of throws and is athletic enough to avoid the pass rush and pick up some yards with his legs as well.
And he's 9th right now in pass efficiency in the country.
Scott Fegan says, how good do you see this defense getting to by Stanford, and how good can the offense be by Stanford? Do you see Notre Dame scoring 40 plus per game?
Well, I thought they were going to score 40 plus against Boise, so I'm already wrong. But I do think that they still did a lot of good things, and I think that there's more out there for them. I think, for me, the second half of the season, we're going to see the tight ends more involved when it is advantageous for Notre Dame to do so. I'm surprised we haven't seen more two-back at this point, too. Mm-hmm. And CJ still doesn't have all the pages of the playbook yet. And his mastery at the line of scrimmage is getting better by the game. And that helps the entire offense, being in the right protections, being able to check out of a bad play into a good play, or a good play into a great play. I think they're going to be really good. The defense, I'm I think they're going to be a better defense than they are now. Now, how good are they? Are they going to be like Al Golden year 3 good by the end of the year? I need to see a little bit more evidence of that before I jump to that. And the USC game's going to tell us. But I do think this team has the talent to be pretty good. But I've been very encouraged by the last 2 weeks. I mean, Arkansas was number 10 in total offense when they played Notre Dame, and Boise State was 9. You're not talking about, pedestrian offenses. But I need to see a little bit more to go out on that limb. It's too lonely out there.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't think the defense is going to get to a point where it's a strength or the strength. Certainly, I think the offense is going to be the better of the two units. But I do think the defense can be one that isn't necessarily
a liability.
A liability and putting the team in sort of you have to score on every possession kind of situations. Like I think we'll see a more balanced defense that maybe gives up some scores here and there, and certainly gives up some yardage, but like isn't just like giving up 60-yard plays or giving just like looking like Swiss cheese like it was at times earlier in the season. I think it will be a better one, and I think there are some things that we can get into here shortly about why that may be.
The 315 they gave up against Boise was the fewest yards Boise's had since early in the 2022 season.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the defensive improvements, Eric. Notre Dame has now limited the past 2 opponents to a combined 20 points after allowing more than that in the first halves of the two games prior to Arkansas and Boise State. How would you sort of describe the amount of improvement that Notre Dame's defense has shown in these past 2 weeks?
They certainly look like they feel comfortable in the scheme finally. We're starting to see sacks. We saw 4 sacks in the game on Saturday. We're seeing turnovers. Notre Dame is shooting up up the charts in turnover margin, and a big reason is because they're forcing turnovers. It's not just they didn't commit any on offense. They're forcing them. They forced 4, probably should have been 5. And they're being more creative in their pressures. The sacks all came from the linebackers, except for a shared sack that Boubacar Traore was on with Kingston Viliamuasa. But the linebackers had the other 3, and they had half of that one. Leonard Moore makes a huge difference in the back end, and yet the other pieces around him. I think the most underrated piece is Tay Johnson starting, and that started out as, well, he's starting because Adon Schuler has to sit out a half because of a targeting call in a previous game. And then the light bulb went on. And I think him being a starter is huge. And all those things coming together, I think, are getting Notre Dame in the right direction. And you could tell Marcus Freeman is really believing in what Chris Ash is doing. And he's mentioned it 2 Mondays in a row in terms of, I knew what he was like in good times. I wasn't sure. I thought I knew what he was like in bad times, but the way he's responded is really impressive. And I got some pretty good intel on what those meetings were like in terms of when things weren't going well. And there is a deep respect from the other coaches on the staff, and there's a belief in that Chris Ash is going to get this in a really good place, and I think all those things are important.
Yeah, I know. I think there's some folks who want to downplay the competition that this has happened against, but I don't necessarily buy that. Certainly, Arkansas and Boise State don't have the best offenses in the country, but they have good coordinators, good production, and good talent. At Arkansas, just because it fired its head coach, it wasn't because of the way the offense was playing. And I think Boise State struggled a bit against South Florida in the season opener, but its offense has talent. Does that guarantee that Notre Dame is going to have defensive success against USC in a couple weeks? No, but I think it's absolutely valuable in terms of the reshaping and rebuilding of this offense or defense that needed to happen was after the way the season started. What parts of the defense do you think are the most sustainable? Which parts that have improved do you think will continue to last moving forward?
The secondary. They were very talented coming in. I think they have the best position coach at their position in the country, and Mike Mickens. And with Leonard Moore being 100%, I think he's going to bring those other guys along. And again, I think that Tay Johnson being in the starting lineup is a big, big, big difference. And now it gives them some really quality depth with Jalen Stroman and Luke Talich at safety. I think they're the most sustainable. What say you, Tyler?
Yeah, I agree. Leonard Moore's presence and sort of Tay Johnson's playmaking ability, I think, give me a lot of confidence in where that secondary is going. Christian Gray hasn't been picked on as much, or at least if folks have wanted to pick on him, he's done a better job in coverage to prevent them from being able to do that. Hopefully, for Notre Dame's sake, he can continue that. And yeah, that the nickelback position will be important, certainly, in terms of Devontae Smith's health and Dallas Golden continue to be a big part of that defense. But I think the secondary is something that I think is something that will be able to hold up. Another thing that I think, at least in the past two games, that we've seen improvement with is the way that the linebackers can impact the pass rush. I think that is sustainable. That is sort of what I expected going into the season. It wasn't necessarily happening at the start of the season. And so that would be a specific part of the pass rush. I think there needs to be more improvement along the defensive line with the pass rush, maybe with the exception of Boubacar Traore. But especially the way the linebackers have been able to help with that, I think that is sustainable. There was a question here from Brian Habermill. What changes have you noticed from Golden to Ash?
Other than the pass efficiency, defense went from 1 to 103 at one point. They're back up in the 50s. Do you mean, Brian, if you can answer, do you mean schematic? Like how do they play differently? I'm not sure what. Tyler, maybe help me out. You told me you'd be my translator from gibberish to English, and it's usually my gibberish. That's why I don't always understand English.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in reference to sort of what the coaches are trying to do. Let me see. Schematic. Yeah, Brian just chimed in with schematic.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think Notre Dame, at least to start the season, was being more it was using different kinds of zone coverages and trying to do more things, it seemed like, than Notre Dame was trying to do with Al Golden. And later tenure Al Golden versus beginning of his tenure, I think Al Golden just needed to grow into the role as Notre Dame's defensive coordinator too. So I think there's some of that. I think some of the linebacker blitzing packages that we are seeing more now with Chris Ash are more like what we saw under Al Golden. I don't know that was necessarily what we saw from the start. And certainly some of what Notre Dame had wanted to do moving forward. And I'm not sure if this is an Ash thing or a Marcus Freeman thing. Marcus Freeman highlighted this to us back in I guess that was late May. In terms of the defensive ends sort of not being as Viper specific and Big End specific, in terms of they want both of those guys to be able to do both of those roles and not be as reliant on, you have to have only these three guys can play Viper and these three guys can play field end. They want their ends to be more balanced with that. And that's why you see at times Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore on the field at the same time, when maybe they wouldn't have seen as much playing time at the same time last year. If they're healthy, obviously they'd miss a lot of last season.
And I'll just add, again, sometimes how you process plays and whether you're absorbing blocks or you're being aggressive. I mean, I think I bore people to tears by trying to break it down too much, but what it does, there was enough differences in that I think a lot of these guys were thinking too much and they weren't just able to react and play with the athleticism they have. And they've I think he's modified some things to fit their strengths, and they've also figured out what he wants. But I think Jalen Sneed in particular wasn't maybe being used in the way Jalen Sneed was used last year, where it was so many different roles. And now they're saying, okay, well, let's use him, more of a pass rusher here and so forth. And so I think now they've kind of found a happy medium between what they were doing last year and what they're doing this year, just to oversimplify it so people don't actually fall asleep during a show called Football Never Sleeps.
All right, Mike DeVoy says, did the extended quarterback competition in the fall delay CJ's learning the playbook? It's been said he only had a quarter of the playbook for Miami versus what he has now, or was it because it was his first start?
I actually was the one who wrote that, and yes, it was not because of the quarterback competition. Had they picked CJ Carr to be the quarterback at the end of spring, the progression would have been the same. When Mike Denbrock was new at LSU and Jaden Daniels transferred in from Arizona State, there was also a progression in terms of feeding him how much of the playbook week by week, just to get him to master certain things. And then as he was able to show that he can master it, then he was given more and more. And then certainly in year two, the whole thing was open to him. So I think whether it was Kenny Minchey, CJ Carr, whenever they made the decision with two quarterbacks who each only had 4 game snaps last year, that was going to be how Mike Denbrock did it. And I think it proved to be really good. I think what was unexpected in this team was that the defense wasn't able to help carry the load in the early couple of games, whereas last year during that offensive evolution with Riley Leonard, for example, the defense was able to carry them. And that wasn't the case this year. But yeah, this is very deliberate on Mike Denbrock's part. And he did the same thing with Deshaun Kaiser when it was an unexpected guy going to the top of the depth chart in game 2 of that 2015 season.
All right, I thought we could give folks a little snapshot of NC State, and I can lead here if you want me to, Eric. In terms of what do you think the strengths of NC State's team are? Do you have a good sense for that right now?
I think we had a lot of the preview stuff together, so I think we both studied them. So why don't you do the strengths and I do the weaknesses? How's that sound?
Okay. Yeah, I think the offense is obviously the strength of the team overall. They're 26th in passing yards, 31st in total yards. I mentioned Hollywood Smothers, the running back earlier, his elusive rating, being someone that's hard to tackle and makes a lot of guys miss in terms of forcing missed tackles. Justin Jolly is their leading receiver, the tight end, 28 catches for 256 yards and 3 touchdowns. Wide receiver Terrell Anderson is someone that they like to use in terms of trying to get some big plays. So Notre Dame will need to work on that. I'm not sure that I'm sure if you want to pick a strength of the defense, but I'm not sure that the defense is very strong in general. So I think in terms of strengths, we're looking more offensively, and I'm not sure that they're necessarily a special teams, a team that will have special teams that makes Notre Dame pay for it either.
They're as bad a no special teams team on Notre Dame's schedule as there is. I guess I make a matrix every week of all the strengths and the weaknesses of every team Notre Dame plays and update it with their statistical rankings. There's one team that rivals them, and guess what? It's Stanford. Those are the 2 worst special teams. Turnover margin, they're 111th. You look straight down the defense. Sacks, they're 106th. Total defense, they're 77th. Scoring defense, 77th. And this is having played Campbell last week, so that's added into their average. 57th in run defense. That's the best thing that they do, pretty much. Tackles for loss, 50th. But let's put it in context. Their first-year defensive coordinator, DJ Elliott, just went through a terrible tragedy. His daughter recently died from had pediatric cancer. She fought it for 6 years. She died before the Virginia Tech game, and so he missed that game. He was at the Campbell game, but not calling plays. And they were not a good defense before that. And to have all this personal tragedy and adversity layered on top of it has been really, really difficult. Then you throw on the fact that they've had all kinds of injuries in their secondary, and they are really scuffling right now. Dave Doran is in his 13th year. Kind of the interesting connection is Chris Ash and Dave Doran are pretty good friends. They were teammates in college at Drake. They coached together at Drake. They coached together at Wisconsin. I think there were a couple times where Dave Doran would have loved to hire Chris Ash and he wasn't available. So those guys know each other and their philosophies pretty well. NC State has typically been a pretty good defense. They are not this year. And again, it's just a tragic situation that they're trying to work through. And it's really hurting them. I mean, they lost to a not very good Virginia Tech team at home right before the Campbell, the cupcake eating contest that they had at their stadium last week.
I was smiling when you were going through the Chris Ash, Dave Doran connections, because I'm just imagining you asking him questions about him and him not being interested in answering them like he was when you asked him about his playing time at Drake previously.
We won't get Chris Ash this week, so I can ask Mike Brown about it. They all coached at Wisconsin at one point, just not together.
T. Dawson says, any chance we see Love and Price in the backfield on the same play, maybe versus USC?
I'm wondering when we're going to see more of that, because I know it's in there and I'm not sure why they would be saving it, but maybe USC is the game that they would need it. I mean, that may be a game where they need to outscore, where even if the defense is playing well, I don't think anybody's held USC under 30 points this year. So that may be the week that we see it. But I am surprised we haven't seen more of it yet this year.
Yeah, it seemed like something that Notre Dame wanted to use, and it hasn't used as much of late. And I'm curious to see. I mean, certainly a lot of what they've been doing has been working. So maybe that's something that maybe short yardage situations that there's a way that causes some hesitation in defenses and allows Notre Dame to take advantage of that. But I think there's certainly that is something that's in the playbook in terms of when and how much we'll see it. I don't know that we have an answer to. I wanted to bring up this one. Brian Habermill said, that's awful. Can we donate anywhere to support the DC's Daughter, a Preferred Foundation? His last tweet is actually listed in terms of, it says, help me support Children's Hospital of Philadelphia Foundation. So I'm going to just throw that tweet in the comments there. And so you guys can go to that if you wish.
That's where they were living, I think, a big part of her life before they went to North Carolina, and that's where her service was, in Philadelphia.
So yeah, I'm not sure in terms of what else the family has asked for, but that seems worthwhile if you're interested in supporting. Let's see. Oh, Scott Vegan says, Tyler, for recruiting. So let's talk a little bit about recruiting. He said, is Notre Dame doing a big press for Illinois high school players? It looks like they are loaded for the 27 and 28 recruiting years. And yes, that is true. Notre Dame is very interested in the prospects out of Illinois, whether that be guys in Chicago or elsewhere in the state. There was a big game this past weekend that Kyle Kelly and Mike Singer were at over in Chicago. And so Notre Dame is fully invested in trying to get a lot of those players to come to Notre Dame.
Mount Carmel versus Brother Rice. Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to say the names of the teams there. And that includes the likes of Bone Crusher, Eric's favorite recruit, Braden Parks, Quentin Burrell. A lot of noteworthy names to know that
were on our podcast. I interviewed those guys, which is funny.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of coverage still to come, and has already been put out by Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly from that game this past weekend. So expect Notre Dame to spend a lot of time in the state moving forward.
They were never so happy to see me and be interviewed by me because it was pouring rain and it was cold that day. And they got to come up in the press box where I was. So they're like, hey, yeah, let's do an interview with this guy.
I thought we could mention Mike Singer put in 4 recruiting predictions today for Notre Dame's 2027 class. He's only publicly revealed 3 of them, so I don't want to give the 4th one away. It's still behind the paywall. I don't want to be the one to break that. So I'll just tell you right now, and he's put these on Twitter, so you may have already seen them, but he's put in predictions for defensive tackle Braden Parks, who's from Chicago, the godson of Chris Zorich, offensive lineman Cameron Wagner, and corner, who's also from Illinois, and cornerback Xavier Hassan. Rivals has Braden Parks as a 3-star recruit, the number 34 defensive lineman, Wagner as a 4-star recruit, the number 17 offensive tackle, and Hassan is a 4-star recruit and the number 5 cornerback.
Okay, we're not allowed to. Okay, I don't know, star-crossed there, but I just want to mention 2 out of those 3 were also on the podcast.
Yeah, Parks and Wagner. I think Parks would be the most important of that group. I think even though they have a 3-star rating that caused a reaction from Eric, I think he has a chance to be special. Notre Dame needs defensive tackles. And
is that a Rivals industry rating, or is that the Rivals rating?
That's the Rivals rating. When I say Rivals, okay, I usually mean specifically to Rivals. I prefer that rating than the industry rating personally. That's a long favored that's been my preference for a long time. Previous to when we worked for Rivals, I just thought that I'd like the individual sites rankings than some amalgamation of all of them, trying to put them together. Let's see. Jeff Stevens asked about Bob, or commented about Bob Moore. And I was curious if you wanted to chime in here. And I know you're close to Bob, and folks might be curious because I know Bob hasn't been doing as much YouTube stuff for us lately. You want to fill folks in on Bob? He's okay as far as I know, so I wanted to make sure that we said that, right?
Yes. So I think I can kind of tell the story with his blessing. Bob was doing YouTube content for both us and the Blue and Gold channel. And there came a point, he works for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame told him that they preferred that he not be commenting on Notre Dame football, whatever the comments were. And that, if he was he's certainly free to do it if he wasn't employed by Notre Dame. And so he's hit the pause button on doing this stuff. I think down the road, maybe we'll see Bob again because he's really good at it, but I'll let him kind of be his own voice on that. But that's what they asked for him not to do that. And they want to kind of make that a broad policy across the board. If you are a Notre Dame employee, they're not real jazzed about you doing Notre Dame football commentary, whatever that looks like, and just trying to be fair across the board. So that's what's going on with Bob, but he's still very healthy and raising his 4 kids, and we miss him a lot, and he texts, and he's still very interested in Notre Dame football, and so we'll keep you updated.
Yeah, you probably have the direct line in terms of his private commentary in terms of what's going on with Notre Dame football. So it's unfortunate that we can't hear from him more regularly, but we obviously appreciate what he's done. We have had him on our podcast countless times throughout the years, and I thought he always brought a lot of great insight to us.
And he was on the infamous "Oh Crap" episode of Football Never Sleeps when Tyler was on vacation.
And I have shared the file of that, just the small clip of Eric saying "Oh crap." Just need to figure out the right time to work it into one of our episodes or something. But I think that'll do it for us here on Football Never Sleeps. We appreciate everyone tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video if you haven't already. How'd you make it this far? If you haven't liked the video, or be subscribed for that matter, And we will talk to you later in the week. We'll have a Third and Gold podcast out on Thursday, so look out for that.